Okay, so we are on chapter 3 of James Rachel's The Elements of Moral Philosophy. Today we're going to talk about subjectivism and ethics. So again, as I say in the beginning of each of these, read the chapter. Also, I have the PowerPoint that I've got behind me is also on Moodle, so check that out as well. So ethical subjectivism is a bit like cultural relativism in the sense that it's saying that there is no objective right and wrong. There is no objective fact of the matter about morality. But it is slightly different. Whereas cultural relativism says that each culture determines what is correct in that culture, ethical subjectivism instead, it's more about the individual. So the basic idea is that morality is based on our feelings and nothing more. Again, there's no objective right or wrong on this view, only our feelings and opinions. So if I say homosexuality is wrong, this is the example that Rachel uses, or I make any other moral judgment, in other words, I say that abortion is wrong or something like that, or God is well, let's say, Catholicism is the correct religion or something like that, or helping people is a good thing. Any kind of moral judgment is not stating anything about the world, only expressing our own feelings or opinions. So saying any of those things is just kind of like saying I like ice cream, right? It's just expressing my feeling or opinion about something. So he detours a little bit into explaining how philosophical theories evolve. So a lot of times a philosophical theory will start out one way, as this subjectivism we saw just a second ago, really simply, but then people will have objections and say, well, what about this? And then the theory gets changed to try to deal with these kind of problems. And this is similar to any kind of theory. You might have the same thing with a theory in physics or something like that, or something similar. Or a theory about, let's say, anthropology or something. Except that in those cases, a lot of times the differences, the way the theory gets changed is it with response to new facts about the world. It's not quite that way in philosophy. It might not be necessarily the same kind of facts, but it might be like, wait a minute, it doesn't really work. And so when this happens, when there are objections, then some people might abandon the theory completely. Some people might try to save the theory. They might come up with a new theory that's similar. So he started out with what he's calling now simple subjectivism. And this is just a statement that moral claims are nothing more than a speaker's expression of their approval or disapproval. I already saw this in the other slides, so we're going back to this. So all these things in red, X is morally acceptable, X is good, X is wrong, or X should be done, all just mean that the speaker approves or disapproves of X. So if I say, you should help someone who's drowning, that's just saying that I think that action, or that I approve of that action. Or if I say, you shouldn't kill somebody for no reason, then I'm just saying I disapprove of that action. I'm not giving you any statement about the world, except the statement about my own approval or disapproval. So it is a statement of fact, but that fact merely is about my state of mind. Okay, so if I make a moral statement, I'm stating only a fact about my own attitude or approval or disapproval of that, whatever it is, X, which could be an action or a person. I say so and so is a good person. That's just expressing my attitude or my approval of that person. So I can't be wrong about that. Now the problem with this is that if I say abortion is wrong and somebody else says abortion is acceptable, then we're not really disagreeing because we're just expressing our feelings. So in a sense we're disagreeing, but we're not really disagreeing because we're just saying the way we feel about something. So I think this point gets a little muddy and difficult to understand, but the basic idea is that we tend to think when we say something like abortion is wrong, that we can disagree with somebody who says abortion is acceptable, and simple subjectivism seems to say, well, no, you really can't, because you're just talking about your feelings, and your feeling is a fact about the way you feel. Now, you can't be wrong about that, but you also can't, that there's nothing going on there that you can argue with somebody else about. So if they say abortion is right, and I say abortion is wrong, they're expressing their feeling. They're saying, well, this is the way I feel. I feel that abortion is wrong. I'm not going to say, no, you don't feel that abortion is wrong, right? Not usually. What I want to say is you should say that abortion is not wrong, but there's no basis on simple subjectivism to do that, because we're both stating facts about the world, but those facts are sort of separate from each other. I'm stating the fact about my feeling, they're stating the fact about their feeling. There's no basis on which we can argue about it, or we can even talk about it really, because they can't be wrong about their feeling, I can't be wrong about my feeling. So according to simple subjectivism, there seems to be no where to go with this. You're just stopped. There's no moral discussion, because morality just is expressing your feelings. They're expressing their feeling, I'm expressing my feeling. Neither of us are wrong because we're both right about our own feelings. There's nothing to talk about. And so simple subjectivism implies that we're always right. Again, they can't be wrong about their feeling. I can't be wrong about my feeling. So I can't be wrong about my own moral opinions in the same way I can't be wrong about what kind of ice cream I like, right? I mean, normally we would say that if I say I like chocolate ice cream and I'm being sincere about that, I can't be wrong about it. And yet, this seems weird, because we do want to say if someone says something like Nazis are good people, they're saying something incorrect. But on simple subjectivism, they can't be incorrect because they're just expressing their feelings. So is there a difference then between me saying I like chocolate ice cream and me saying Nazis are good people? On simple subjectivism, there isn't, because they're both just expressing their feelings, but we tend to think that we can do more with the second one, that there should be something to talk about there. And if a moral expression is just stating a fact about your own opinion, then there's nothing to talk about. If that's just what it is. It's not saying anything about the world, it's not saying anything about Nazis, it's not saying anything about good and evil, it's just saying my attitude or my opinion or my feeling really about Nazis, okay? So this seemed like there was something wrong here, something strange. So some philosophers, including Charles Stevenson, they came up with the idea that, well, okay, we can refine this a little bit. And this theory is called motivism. So he pointed out, to begin with, okay, we use language in different ways. Remember that on simple subjectivism, we are talking about a fact. But the fact is simply my feeling. The fact is about my feeling. I feel this way about Nazis. But he points out that when we say something like gas prices are rising, yes, we're saying something that has a truth value. In the same way that I can say, I feel like I feel bad, or I feel negatively toward Nazis, that's also a statement that has a truth value. Either I feel negative about Nazis or I don't, right? There's a truth value about that. It's either true or it's false. And presumably if I say it, I can't be wrong because I know. But But if we say something like, hooray, Nazis, or way to go, Lance, he uses a lot of different examples here, we're not doing this. Those statements don't have a truth value. And they're kind of like saying shut the door. Shut the door is a command, right? But it doesn't have a truth value. It's not true or false. There's nothing true or false about it. In the same way, saying hooray or saying yay Nazis. There's no truth value to any of those sentences. They're a different kind of sentence than even saying I like Nazis, which there's again a truth value there. Either I like Nazis or I don't. Or the door is closed. That is a truth value. It's true if the door is closed, and it's false if the door is open, right? So that statement has a truth value, but close the door does not. It's a command. It's a different use of language. So remember that on simple subjectivism, we were saying that moral language is stating facts, and those facts have to be and are only about our own feelings. So this is where Stevenson is going to change things a bit with this theory of emotivism, and he's going to say, no, moral statements aren't statements about facts about our feelings. Instead, moral statements can be intended to be persuasive. So we're trying to convince somebody. If we say close the door, we're trying to persuade them to close the door, right? So if we say abortion is wrong, we're trying to convince someone not to have an abortion, for example, or something else like that. We'll get back to that idea in a minute. The other idea is that moral language can be used to express an attitude. So saying that Lance is a good person is another way to say, way to go, Lance. So you might say then that moral statements, or Stevenson wants to say that moral statements are statements like, way to go, Lance. They're statements about our expressing an attitude. So they're not saying a fact about my attitude or a fact about my feeling. Instead, they are expressing our feeling. So like if you say ouch, you're expressing your feeling that something hurts. But you're not saying that, it's not the same language usage as saying my toe hurts, which is again a statement with a truth value, whereas ouch is not. So the differences between making a claim about of our attitude, right, a factual claim that could be either true or false, or just expressing it. So according to Stevenson, our moral claims are the second. They're expressing our attitudes, but they're not making a statement about our attitude and about its truth value. This seems like a subtle difference that doesn't really matter, but it kind of does. Because what happens is that on emotivism, then people can disagree about moral matters. Okay, but to get there, we have to explain this first. So we have to understand that for Stevenson, we can have disagreements of two different kinds. Here's the two different kinds. First, we can disagree in our beliefs. So if we disagree about a fact of the world, in the world, for example, then our beliefs disagree. So I might believe that Lee Harvey Oswald killed at JFK, and maybe you don't. So then we have a disagreement in our belief about the way the world is, and facts about the world. So since simple subjectivism interprets moral disagreement as this kind of disagreement, but remember, only about the moral facts, which moral facts for them are only about whether or not I feel a certain way about something. So facts about morality for simple subjectivism are just facts about whether I believe or whether I have a certain attitude towards something, whether I like it or don't like it. That's the only fact we're talking about. So that's why on simple subjectivism we can't have moral disagreements, because again, I can't be wrong about my own feelings or my own beliefs about what I feel about something. So this, he says, is the problem that simple subjectivism faces, and what he wants to do to get around this problem is to say, no, this isn't the kind of disagreement that moral disagreements are. In fact, moral disagreements are disagreements about attitude. So moral statements don't consist of claims about our own feelings, which are facts, but they might instead be claims about our attitudes. So they're not statements of fact, but statements, so I did this a little bit wrong. They're not claims about our attitudes, they're expressions of our attitudes. Okay, so they're not making claims about our attitudes, they're expressing our attitudes. So it's again, I'm not claiming that my toe hurts, I'm just expressing my attitude toward the pain in my toe by saying ouch. So the expression of our attitude is different from making a claim about our attitude, because the claim about the attitude can have a truth value, it's either true or false. The expression of the attitude, just saying ouch, doesn't have a truth value, right? It's just a expression. So when we disagree about morality, then we have different attitudes about morality. So instead of being factual disagreements, they're just disagreements in attitude. So I might say abortion yay, and you might say abortion boo. So we don't disagree about the facts about what our respective attitudes are, but we disagree in our attitudes. So that's the kind of disagreement then that can happen on emotivism for moral facts. So we can have disagreements, but they're kind of weird disagreements, right? Because they're not disagreements that we can argue about. They're just, well, you like it and I don't. Now, again, this seems like a simple point, a weird point kind of too, because yeah, we couldn't have disagreements on simple subjectivism because we're talking about our own selves. Now we're not talking about ourselves, we're in a sense not talking at all. We're just expressing our feelings, okay? So here, we're not always right then, in a sense, in the same way we are on simple subjectivism. Instead though, here's where it gets even weirder. It's not that we're not always right, it's the fact that we're not right or wrong. Because you can't be wrong when you say ouch. You're just expressing your attitude. So there's still no right and wrong, but it's different. It's that it's not that I can't be wrong. In fact, I'm not right or wrong. There's still no fact of the matter about morality on emotivism. But we can disagree about it. That's the only thing we've gotten here, basically. What we've gotten from emotivism versus simple subjectivism, we've gotten to the point where we can have disagreements because our attitudes can disagree. But we can still just sort of yell at each other. Because I can say abortion yay and you say abortion nay. And yes, we're disagreeing. But the problem here is that we still can't really argue about morality in any kind of interesting way. It's still the case that for motivists, our moral judgments are beyond reproach. We can disagree in our attitudes about morality, but we still can't argue about them because they're just attitudes, not judgments. So in order to have an argument about morality, we have to believe that morality is the sort of thing that involves facts about the world, not just facts about whether I like it or don't like it, which is a fact, but not a very interesting one. Instead, we have to be able to say, if we're going to really argue about morality, that morality involves facts about the world, what is right and wrong. But both simple subjectivism and emotivism deny this. Because in both cases, despite these little weird differences, they both think that morality is only about our attitudes or feelings towards something. So they're both against the idea of objective right and wrong. So we do argue, though, an act of morality is more than about just feelings and attitudes. So something's still missing. It seems like, now there are people who believe in emotivism. There are philosophers who still espouse this theory. And they simply say that if you say there are objective facts about the world, you're just wrong. There are not. and that, again, if you say murder is wrong, you're just saying boo murder, murder, boo. You're simply expressing your attitude. You are not making any claim about the facts in the world at all. Not even the facts about your own attitude. You're just expressing your attitude. So the problem with this is that Rachel points out is that we generally expect people to have reasons for their moral judgments. So if I say Nazis are good, you might ask me why I believe this, and I maybe should give you some reasons, right? Whereas if you ask me, why do you like chocolate ice cream? And what do you say? You just like it, right? You don't really, sometimes you can give reasons, but those reasons are kind of weird. I mean, it's just, it's just an attitude. And so emotivists try to get around this by saying that moral language is persuasive. We're going back to this persuasive idea. So I'm trying to, if I say that you should, that I like Ike, then I'm trying to get you to vote for Dwight Eisenhower, right? And so, but the problem Rachel brings up with this is that if you're being persuasive, a lot of times you don't really care. You're focused on the outcome, and you want the person to change their attitude or to do something, and you don't really care how that happens. This is his point. So if I give you any kind of reason, and that reason persuades you to change your mind, I don't really care if that's a lie or if it's a reason that shouldn't make any difference, like Eisenhower has blue eyes, therefore you should vote for him. I mean, who cares, right? He says that any relevant reason that works is good enough reason for the emotivist. But this seems to kind of go off the subject of moral discourse and making moral discourse into simple persuasiveness seems to really change what we think moral discourse is or ought to be, that it should be more than just that. And so that's where Rachel's goes with it, is that even if emotivists allow us to just sort of to allow moral discourse in the sense of trying to change someone's mind, it still might not be. It's still not the case that we're trying to present facts about the world and try to come to the agreement on what the truth is. We're just trying to get someone to change their attitude. And how we do that doesn't really matter if there's no truth about what's right. So if there's no objective fact to the matter about whether abortion is wrong, then how I get you to change your mind about that just because I want you to doesn't matter. Whereas if we really think that there's a truth, there's a fact to the matter about whether abortion is wrong or not, and that we're trying to get to that truth, and that the truth in fact is what we want and not just to convince somebody, then our arguments are going to be a bit different. And also it seems to be more like what we think morality ought to do or ought to be. It seems as though morality loses its purpose if it's simply about trying to change someone's mind for no real reason. And what would be the reason? If I wanted to change your mind about whether abortion is wrong, but I didn't really think that there was a fact to the matter about whether abortion was wrong, I would probably just want to change your mind for something to perhaps benefit me in some kind of way because I wanted something for some particular reason. And that probably is the way moral discourse works some of the time, but I don't think we think it should. Just because it does doesn't mean it should. And I think we believe that when we are doing genuine moral discourse, we're trying to get at some kind of truth, some kind of rightness, some kind of correctness about it. Like if someone says Nazis are good, you're gonna say, well, you're just wrong. And we seem to, I think in most cases, we think there's an actual fact of the matter there. So we should expect more of our moral discourse than just persuasiveness. And so this is part of the problem with emotivism, is that at best it only allows moral discourse in the sense of just trying to get someone to change their attitude, but the reasons for it, we don't know. Like, the reason isn't because it's right or wrong, because there is no right and wrong. It's just attitudes. So why do people like these kind of views? Why do people like subjectivism and cultural relativism and emotivism? Part of it, according to Rachel's, is that people seem to subscribe to some kind of false dichotomy about ethics. They think that either moral facts exist like planets and spoons exist, or our value judgments are nothing but opinions. So people say, well, I can't see moral facts, I can't, we can't agree on them, they don't seem as obviously there as stuff that we can see in the world. So it must be that it's all just opinion. But that's a false dichotomy. It's giving you two possibilities, neither of which are very good, and making you choose between them. But Rachel says, well, maybe there's a third possibility. Maybe a moral judgment is true if it's backed by better reasons than the alternatives. So just because you can't see something doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So if the third option is correct, what happens? We can't make something good or bad just by our attitude. And I think that, just if I like Nazis, that doesn't mean they're good, right? I mean, that seems pretty obvious. We can be right or wrong about morality. Now, maybe not in all cases. There might be fuzzy cases. We might not be able to convince each other. But we can be right or wrong about morality. It seems to be a reasonable thing to believe. And then there can be proofs in ethics. In other words, we can make arguments, we can provide reasons for what we believe. So those are the implications of some kind of objective view about morality. What that ends up being is something that is not easy to answer, but at least not believing that everything is just about attitude or just about feelings allows us to get here. And again, one of the other things people want to say is that, well, we can't prove ethical truths the way we can prove scientific or mathematical truths, therefore there aren't any proofs. But just because we can't prove something in the same way as science doesn't necessarily mean we can't prove it. There are different kinds of proofs for different kinds of things depending on what discipline you're in. So some arguments might be complicated, and we might all agree about the outcome. We might not all agree about the outcome, but that doesn't mean there is no fact. Some things can be difficult to prove, and we can not be able to convince people, but there can still be a fact of the matter about it. For example, the JFK example. We might have a difficult time proving who actually killed John F. Kennedy, but that doesn't mean there was no fact of the matter about it, right? And it doesn't mean that we can't provide arguments and try to persuade people with arguments and give reasons. And again, he points out too on the third one that we must distinguish between proving and persuading. We might provide a very good proof, but certain people might still not be persuaded. That doesn't necessarily mean the proof is bad or that we're wrong. Just because it's hard to convince people of something doesn't mean, again, there isn't a fact of the matter about it. Same with the JFK example. You might never convince the conspiracy theorists about your theory about what happened to JFK, but that doesn't mean there's no truth and that nobody's right or wrong. We're certainly not going to say that. Somebody shot him, even if we can't figure out who it was. So again, subjectivism, emotivism, simple subjectivism, emotivism, and cultural relativism are all different, but they all have they all share the same belief that there is no objective right or wrong in ethics. And the reason why we often start with this in ethics classes is to show why we do the rest of it, because a lot of times, most of the time the rest of it is moving from the view that there is some kind of objective right and wrong, even if it's difficult to discover. Because if there wasn't, then there wouldn't be any point to a lot of this. So that's chapter 3. Read it, check out the PowerPoint, and I'll see you next time.